The downing of the Malaysian plane happened the day after President Barack Obama announced sanctions against Russia to punish the Russians for their support of the rebels. The question now remains, what more should the U.S. do? Here to talk about that and other issues is U.S. Congressman John Kline. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, let me ask you first, sir, what about sanctions? Should there be additional sanctions? Many of our European allies are concerned because they have such a strong trade relationship with Russia.
Yeah, but clearly this is behavior way beyond the pale here. There's no question that the surface-to-air missile, an SA-11, came from Russia. It's a Soviet-era missile, obviously very lethal. There's no question that the Russians are backing the rebels, the separatists. So we cannot tolerate that kind of behavior. We, the United States, need to impose sanctions. We need to work with our European allies to do that. Yes, we want to know more about what happened and who directly was involved, but we already know where the missile came from and that Russians were involved at least to some extent. So we need to step up. We need to do things to help the Ukrainians. We can provide them more lethal aid. We need to put sanctions into place, but we can't accept this.
All right. How about providing them lethal aid? Does that mean arming them? I mean, should we be backing them? And what does that then lead to?
Well, we should be backing them, and we can provide them aid. They are a sovereign country.
Including arms aid?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. You know, you were a military aide to Ronald Reagan back during the Cold War in the early 1980s. We have a picture of you there. I mean, this certainly has the feel to many people as if a new Cold War is emerging.
Yeah, it does, and I found myself, I think I mentioned earlier that I start saying Soviet Union, even though the Soviet Union itself has been gone for some 20 years. But it does have that feel. We've seen the Russians show aggression in Georgia back in 2008, I think it was. We should have been alarmed then. I think some of our allies did look with some alarm. Then we saw the open aggression when they took Crimea, now in the eastern Ukraine. And so it's interesting, I was in Turkey and Portugal a few months ago this spring, and they were already talking about, these are NATO allies, they were already talking about the weakened state of NATO and their concerns because the rise of Putin's aggression is alarming to them.
All right. Switching gears here, you're in something of a food fight with, of all people, the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. You are the chairperson of the House Education Workforce Committee, and you are among those Republicans saying you feel that these new school lunch restrictions need to be rolled back. The First Lady is very much against that. Yeah, but we need some flexibility here. Everybody wants school kids to have healthy lunches. But this is a federal mandate, goes across the country, and it has some backlash. It has some clear downside because we have seen that it's very costly. In a 5-year period, it's going to be over $3 billion of extra costs. The schools have to bear this. We've seen plate waste, that is kids getting the food and then throwing it away in pretty big numbers. Well, the kids are required to get a serving of fruits and vegetables, and is that what you're concerned about? That, and they're not eating it?
And then they're not eating it. So what good have you done there? And so this is a mandate that is causing some real problems in schools across the country, and they're looking for flexibility. Not fights over whether or not white potato is a vegetable. So we need to let schools, let the experts provide the food, the nutritional food that they think is necessary. Emphasizing the need for nutritional food is a good thing. Having a federal mandate that applies to every school in the country and it's proving to be unworkable in some places is not.
All right. Let me ask you, you had a hearing last week about a couple of issues. One of them, child sex trafficking. There's some legislation that's being introduced. It's a bipartisan effort.
Right.
300,000 kids a year victims of child sex trafficking.
Right. Isn't that shocking?
Yes.
I mean, I think most people don't realize the extent of this problem. 300,000 a year. And so there's some very good work being done out there. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that's the hearing that we were having last week. They're doing really, really good work around the country and trying to find these kids and trying to save them. But there are some problems that need to be fixed. So we have several pieces of legislation that are coming up this week. They are very bipartisan. Just to make it easier for agencies to cooperate, to find these kids and help these kids, to help people who are caregivers better understand how to identify the problem. So it's not big pieces of legislation, not big giant Obamacare, but it's important legislation to help these kids.
All right. Well, Congressman Kline, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
I'm glad to be here.